Welcome to the Wellness Creator Podcast. In this week's episode, we are going to discuss the art of private podcasting. Hello, Sandy.
And Jenny, why are we talking about private podcasting?
Well, if you're listening to this episode, chances are that the brand new private podcasting feature is now live on the Marvelous platform, which means that you can include it within your existing plan. Most likely, you can incorporate private podcasts into your products and services on Marvelous, which is so exciting.
Amazing. It's super exciting. Yeah. So let's just talk about what is a private podcast for those who have never joined one or listened to one. Let's explain that. So a private podcast is a feed that I get invited to. So it's on your podcast app, like it's on Apple or Spotify or whatever, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you get a private feed from your teacher or your coach. And you're only the people who have an invite to that, it's because that's why it's private, have access to listen to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another way of thinking about it is it's a permissions-based podcast. So right now you can go on to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or the Google Play podcast or whatever Overcast you use, and you can search for your favorite podcast and it just shows up and you can see it and it's public and it's free and it's wonderful, right? Podcasting is wonderful, but many of you might not know that there are also all these hidden podcasts that you as a layperson, random stranger, cannot see or have access to. And those are private podcasts. And they are podcasts that are being run and hosted by people who usually run businesses, and they are incorporating private podcasts as a paid offering. Sometimes it's still a free podcast, but it's just behind the paywall of a subscription. So you have to trade your email address to get access.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we decided to add this to Marvelous because we use private podcasts all the time for our coaching clients because for our coaching calls, you know, if you miss it or if you ask a question and then you're not able to show up to the call live, then you have to find the video and watch it, which totally fine and it works. But we created on another platform, which we no longer need to use. We created on another platform the option to listen to that coaching call that you might have missed through our private podcast feed so that you could listen, you could just put it on your phone or in your car or wherever and listen to the coaching call that you missed. So we've been using private podcasts for years and years and years. And now that is part of a big reason why we built it into the platform because it's so handy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So whenever you and I have a situation when we're teaching on Marvelous or coaching on Marvelous where we have to do manual work or hire people to do manual work, we're always like, technology could solve this. And this was kind of one of the last remaining vestiges of manual work in our own business. Besides our software company, we run our own business where we teach on our own platform, of course. And this was one of those things where it was like, this is annoying. We still have to maintain records of who should have access to this and who shouldn't. And you have to manually remove a person when they leave a product. And so we just realized actually we can just have Marvelous do all this. And I also want to say for folks who are like, well, they could just watch the video, the coaching clients, they could just go back and watch the video in Marvelous, couldn't they? Yes. But I have a strong distaste for watching video that could be audio. And I know I'm not alone. And I think a lot of us have that kind of video fatigue after the pandemic, where we don't want to sit and look at a screen unnecessarily, especially when you're just listening and there's not any kind of movement instruction or, maybe if you're an artist and you're teaching something visually, of course a video is appropriate. Or if you're an influencer and you're showing off your new Lambo, obviously you need a video. But for lots of things like coaching or teaching something that's more intellectual, you don't need a video. In fact, it's just a waste of everyone's time and energy to teach, create, host, and then watch the video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've been part of programs in the past that included a private podcast. and I consumed way more content
Mhm.
and was much less likely to leave because I could just on
Mhm.
a run or a bike ride or whatever, just put the coaching call or the feed in my ear and
Yeah.
catch up and listen
Yeah.
to it. And I didn't want to give that up because it was so convenient to listen to all the calls
Yeah.
after they already happened. So
Especially in a car. Like a
yeah.
car
Yeah.
is a terrible place to be navigating menus of videos.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. And that's a good point because what the private podcast will do is you can just keep playing, right? Like in
Mhm.
the video, you've got to go next.
Yeah. 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 And like chances are your screen is on, you're running your battery down. Like there's just a lot of reasons why an audio feed, a podcast RSS feed, which we've built into Marvelous now, is ideal. And you play it. If it wasn't completely obvious, you and your students are able to play these private podcast feeds through existing podcast tools like Spotify.
Mhm.
And so that all those controls are built in to be compatible with your car or whatever device you're using. If you're in your house and you're using Amazon's Alexa, I'm not going to say her name, like whatever, it all works. Like tell her to play the thing and it will. And that's great because you can't do that with a platform like Marvelous. Like we don't have, our platform's not coded to like tell a robot to turn it on and play it through your Sonos speakers. So now you're going to have that ability. And let's, Sandy, talk about some of the ways that folks can use this effectively in their
Well, yeah, and
businesses.
that's why we wanted to do this podcast because we're
Yeah.
obviously excited about the future, but then we started thinking about all these different ways that
Yeah.
clients could use a private podcast in their business. So let's start out by talking about if you have, for the Marvelous clients that are out there, if you have current products like a course, what could they do with the private podcast?
Yeah. So this is maybe the most simple and easiest thing to start with if you're not running a coaching program like we are. And that would be just to take a course. Let's say you have a video based course, like a teacher training program or a course on learning how to do XYZ. You just would simply add an audio component to that, like to that course, a private podcast feed, so that somebody who wants to learn the content on the go can just be listening through Spotify when they're in the car. And you do that. I mean, there's obviously help docs and resources that show you how to do it, but it takes all of like 2 seconds to do it. And
Yeah,
that's the beautiful thing is that we've built the tool into Marvelous that will essentially instantaneously extract the audio automatically from the videos.
yeah. This video, this podcast is not about how to use the feature, the technical, like we're just talking about the strategy behind it. So, the other thing that I just thought of that when you were describing the course, it's like a lot of, I know for our own clients, a lot of people will go through one of our courses and then they'll go through it again.
Oh yeah.
And so that is like a great reason that they would maybe just go listen to, they've already learned the material, they're working through it, they're doing the things, but I just want to listen to it again. I want to get inspired by this lesson or that lesson. And you can just listen to it on the audio on your phone. It's so much easier.
So much better. And I just have to say a personal caveat here. I didn't even think about this until this moment. Why this is so powerful for me is because for those of you, there's probably like 1/10 of our listeners are also lawyers, but a lot of people who are lawyers find their way into the wellness industry for very obvious reasons, self-care. Instead of like when you're going to study for the bar exam, at least in the United States, and it's probably the same in Canada, you have to take these like horrifying classes that are very expensive and like they're days and weeks and weekends where you have to go sit in a room and like cram for all these different subjects. And I don't know how I figured this out, but when I was finishing law school, I found this man who was like a retired general who recorded all these audios on, it might have been MP3s. I'm really dating myself. Like it was probably MP3s, but it might have been CDs. I don't know. And no, it was MP3s. Podcasts they were like babies anyway, they existed. Anyway, and I bought that. And I remember walking around Green Lake in Seattle, like for 4 hours a day, listening to this man teach me all the crammy lessons for the bar exam. And I never once had to go sit in one of those rooms. And I was like outside walking. We obviously learn differently when we're moving. And it was so good. And it was like, why doesn't everybody do this? And of course, now you and I became podcasters and have been doing that for 8 years. And like audio is everything to me. But like there is something about teaching and learning through audio and allowing your students or clients or customers to have the freedom to go and learn where they want, how they want. And this really enables that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about memberships. So if you have a current membership, when we know that that is the most common type of product to build on Marvelous, so many of you out there probably have one, how can a private podcast help to support? And really with memberships, we talk about churn and keeping people in the membership and giving them a good experience. So how would this decrease churn?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. So the one simple thing that you could do in a membership, especially if you don't have too much content, is just like put the content that you're uploading into the membership into a private podcast feed so that people can access the audio in a really simple, streamlined way. But what you and I were strategizing about ourselves was this idea of like, let's just say you're a movement-based instructor. That is where you run into trouble with a really big crowded membership because you overwhelm your clients. Like that's the most,
as in content, not people. Just to be clear.
Yes. Private content. Yeah. So the mistake that we see with a lot of memberships on our platform and in the wellness industry in general is that like you as a teacher or coach, instructor, or a fitness guru, you're creating tons and tons of content and you're uploading it mostly in video form to your membership site. And then you just leave it there forever. And then it becomes this overwhelming resource. So what you could do is start to curate like weekly playlists, audio playlists, like people could take and do in the park or at the gym with that content. This is what a lot of higher end fitness apps, like people who pay to build their own apps, like this is a huge way that those applications function, because you're telling people like, okay, it is the third week of July. These are the things that you're going to do this week. Monday, you're doing this. Tuesday, you're doing this. And by giving it to them, you could do this with your videos in the playlist feature that we have. And I encourage all of you to do that if you're not using that feature already. But I also really encourage you to do this if your content lends itself to audio, meaning people don't need the visuals in order to safely perform the exercises. I would really consider giving them audio-based private podcast content where you're curating that and dripping it out on like probably a weekly basis. And this is something that you could just add in. It will take you very little time to do this with your existing content. And it's a huge value add to your existing customers. And that will help to prevent churn and also get people raving and excited and telling their friends about it.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I just thought of, in addition to what you just said, is like, I know we have a client who does like, she has a membership, menopause, weight loss, and she has like a little course inside there that's like lose 12 pounds in 12 weeks or something like that. And she could turn that course into an audio version. So she runs it live. Like she'll go through the material, I believe, with her existing members, from July 1 to August 15th. So you could just make that audio, and you could, when you go to launch that membership, when you're talking about it and selling it, just to say like, you can listen to this 12-week course on audio. Yeah. Come join the community, come meet us, but know that you've got this in your ear. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, no, it's so good. I think that there's a lot of ways, and I'm sure there's so many ways that we're not even thinking of. Like everyone, whenever we release a feature, people find super creative, outside the box ways to use the features that we release. So I'm excited to see that. But I know for many of you that have been like running a membership for years, you got a big old crowded library full of content. And I would be thinking about features like this and our playlist feature as ways to like streamline and make that content easy to consume and make the next step for your students or clients obvious to them. Like this becomes your job as their teacher or their coach or their guide.
It's a great opportunity to kind of re-energize your membership and talk about another way to consume the material. So that's great. Okay. So really, bottom line, if you have existing things you are selling in Marvelous, just turn it into an audio feed so that people can consume the material you're already making in audio form. The other things we were talking about were like, you could create new products that were based on audio. So your example of membership content or weekly Explain what you were telling me about, like going to the gym with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like this is so common now too that I see a lot of fitness influencers selling products like this. They're not always audio. Sometimes they're like app based and sometimes they're actually like PDF based. But this idea that you're giving people a weekly plan and telling them like, here, okay, download this, podcast for the week, this podcast playlist, and then go and we're going to tell you day by day what to do in the gym or what to do with your at home workout. Like that's so nice for people. It's such a great gift for them. And so if you're not curating content that way and directing people with such specificity, it's something to think about as a growth opportunity in your business. Like this will create better results most likely for your clients because you're giving them more specific direction on how to be successful with your programs.
The other thing that I remember, we had a client who did so well with this, a meditation membership. So obviously you don't need video for that, but you could just sell a membership that is audio only, that is meditation, for example.
Yes. And through a playlist, right? So here's where things like you could have done that already on Marvelous, right? Like you could have had an audio-based course or membership with audios instead of videos. But the problem is like when people are using audio, it's a different experience than video. They're not often sitting and staring at their device. And so the behavior change really matters. So I'm thinking about some of our clients who do sleep, Sandy, like meditations for sleep or sound healing for sleep, sound bowls or other kind of instrumentals. Like if I'm doing a meditation for sleep, I can tell you, I want to tell my device to turn off at the end or to turn off at a certain time. And like, yeah, maybe your screen goes to sleep or something on your device when you're playing it through, an app. But I want to use Spotify. Like that's what I use for all of my audio personally. And like if I'm going to do a sleep program, my life is 100 times easier if I'm running that through Spotify. So I just think giving your students or clients the gift of those podcast platforms that are really optimized again to work with home devices like Alexa or Apple Home or, whatever they are. Like it's all integrated, it's all working together, and it's just super user friendly.
Okay. The other thing they could do is like, let's talk about opt-ins, but one of the options I was just thinking, listening to you, was like, you could do daily motivations. Like that's kind of a big thing too. Yeah. And they could just on private feed get a little voice message for you, some inspiration, a reading, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for our spiritual healers and spiritual teachers, for sure. Like there's huge opportunity to do private podcasts and audio feeds that way. Yeah, like that's all stuff that doesn't need visuals. Right. In fact, almost nothing needs visuals. Like you and I, Sandy, I don't know if we have 30 or 40 courses that we've created on the platform at this point. Not all of them are currently for sale because that's too many things to sell at one time. But like, I don't know, 90% of the content that we made slides for, we didn't really need slides, right? We're just putting one of the words that we mentioned or like a picture that's representing what we talk about. Certainly there are graphics and spreadsheets that are very helpful at times to show visually, and that's really important. But again, I think it's like less than 10% of our own teaching really required visuals. And so I think that this is about the discipline of knowing when visuals matter and when they don't. And I don't know. I think the direction things have been headed is in audio. It's like in community and in audio is one of the things that I think is we're going to continue to see trending both on the internet in general and in the wellness industry.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing we talked about that you could use private podcasts for is YouTube, right? Like you could take, so Jenny, I know this is a problem for you because you do want to listen and not sit in front of a screen. But if you have a really big YouTube channel, you could quickly embed those YouTube videos into Marvelous, and you could either sell or create a free product as an opt-in of just the audio of your YouTube.
Yeah, brilliant. I think you should do it because you can embed your YouTube videos. If you have an existing channel, you can embed your YouTube videos into your media library. Like it's just cut and paste and then embed. It's like a second, right? So you add those videos in and then you can drag those into a playlist that becomes a private podcast where we extract the audio out. And then I would do this if it were me. I would do this as a free product, and then I would promote it on my YouTube channel as a way to collect email addresses from my YouTube subscribers. So it's like, oh, hey, thanks so much for following my channel and liking this video and all the things that you say in a YouTube video. But hey, if you want to have special access to an audio feed of curated content from my channel, drop your email here, go here, and then you'll get access. And it's just a way for you, obviously, to collect their email address, but also for them, again, to remember you, to like have a podcast graphic on their phone of your stuff, and for them to be able to access your content in a way that's so convenient for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's about the experience. It's about making it easy. And I forgot about that. I think it's important to know about the podcast graphic that your students, clients, if they join the podcast feed, they will have in their podcast app a little square with like your logo name. It's like branded, right? Which is just...
So yes, cool. For every single private podcast you create in Marvelous, you get to design and or upload a square graphic that looks like a professional podcast, like in the player, in Spotify. Yeah. It will look like a real podcast with real podcast show art. So you get to define, obviously, what that looks like. We have, of course, our Canva integration where we've linked, if you go to create your private podcast, we send you into a template that has a template area in Canva that has a bunch of sample podcast show arts. You can just edit one of those and have something that looks really good in a couple seconds. You can obviously upload your own graphic and have it be whatever you want. If it's an audio podcast, a private podcast of an existing course, I would probably try to make that square podcast graphic look like the branding of your course. You know, like you want to be strategic about it. But yeah, I mean, that little square of real estate on someone's phone is so valuable. Yeah. So like anytime you can get your brand in a little square on somebody's phone, like that's something that's worth doing just for that reason.
We forget we joined a membership. We're like, oh yeah, that thing, and I never used it, so I want. But if it's like this constant reminder, it's a great little marketing tool.
Yeah.
So
and every time you add an episode, Sandy, they get a notification in whatever that podcast app is.
Yeah. And we also forgot to say, like when they leave your membership, they will be removed from the private podcast, so you don't need to manually do that. Like, So that's also super.
So that's the manual work that we took away for ourselves when we released this feature, is that we used a third-party tool, which was great. It worked great, except for that, again, it was manually, we had to manually remove people once their access to a product expired in Marvelous. And now the permission to access the private podcast feed in Spotify or wherever it is tied to whether that person has access to the product in Marvelous. So like you just eliminated all of the administrative hassle, and all of a sudden their magic podcast just disappear. If their payment doesn't go through, bye-bye podcast. Like, I mean, just telling it to you, you know, like it's real, like that's motivating. If somebody didn't mean to cancel their membership, they're going to realize it because all of a sudden the little app, the little podcast art is gone out of their podcast player.
Yeah. Amazing. So as we move forward with this recording right now, this feature hasn't even launched. So it's all new. No one's even used it, but I can't wait to hear from our Marvelous clients to learn how they're using it. I'm sure they're going to come up with a lot more ideas than what we have. So let us know how you use it. And it's going to be, I think it's one of the coolest features we've released in a while.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Sandy. We will see you all next time.
Bye.